Hey, be careful over there. Perfect pitch is the ability to identify or recreate any musical note without a reference tone. Like this. That note's an A flat.
Actually, Daddy, that's not an A flat. That's an A.
Oh. Well, I don't have perfect pitch. Anyways, we're going to talk about a lot of the misconceptions about it, when you're able to develop it, and all the latest scientific research on it. Today on Everything Music. This is my son Dylan at age 5. I discovered he had perfect pitch, also known as absolute pitch, nearly 2 years before this video was made. In the following 2 years, his pitch recognition has developed to an astounding level. It was this video that went viral in December of 2015, receiving 22 million views on Facebook in the first 2 weeks. This was the kind of video I would typically record once every couple years to show my family back in New York his progress in musical development. But this time was to be different. 4 weeks after this initial video, I released a second one to prove to people that the first one wasn't somehow faked. This one also went on to get tens of millions of views. So how does one go about developing perfect pitch? We're going to talk about both nature and nurture to try and find out the truth behind perfect pitch development. Did you know that the incidence of perfect pitch is only 1 in 10,000 people? Yet tonal language speakers, such as those that speak Mandarin or Vietnamese, have a 30% higher incidence of it. According to researcher Diana Deutsch, the reason for this is that in these so-called tonal languages, changing pitch can completely alter the meaning of words. For example, the Mandarin word ma means mother when the vowel is a constant high pitch, but means hemp when pronounced with a rising pitch. So this would lead you to believe that nurture is more important than nature. Well, there's this thing called an SNP, a single nucleotide polymorphism. It's a variation of a single nucleotide that occurs at a certain position in the genome where each variation is present in some appreciable degree within the population. SNPs occur normally throughout a person's DNA. They occur once every 300 nucleotides on average, which means there's roughly 10 million SNPs in the human genome. Most commonly, these variations are found in the DNA between genes. They can act as biological markers, helping scientists locate genes that are associated with disease or unique abilities like perfect pitch. There's actually an SNP that's been identified called RS3057, or the perfect pitch gene. So, out of curiosity, I went and had my DNA tested. I also had my son Dylan and my daughter Lennon to see if we had this gene, RS3057. And much to my amazement, we all have it. But what I found out was that 31.9% of the population of Caucasian people also have it, as well as 50% of Asians. So as far as it being something rare, it isn't. So I have to look elsewhere. Let's get a couple experts to weigh in on it. When you think of a note, does it just pop into your head?
Yes.
Okay, can you think of a G right now?
Uh-huh.
Sing G. Play it. What about B? What about A flat? What about C? If you think of a G minor chord, can you hear that in your head?
Yes.
Can you sing that?
Okay.
When you hear these really complex chords,
C augmented over D flat augmented.
do you recognize pieces of them? Do you say, oh, I hear this chord and then I hear this chord?
Uh-huh.
So you recognize them because you know some of the theory behind it, right?
Yep.
So if I said, what are the notes in a G major chord?
GBD. Yeah, some of the chords that you played have little chords, and I just split them up into groups and say the whole chord.
Tell me the name of this chord.
A flat 7 over F major 7 sharp 5.
What are the notes?
F, A, C sharp, E, A flat, C, E flat. flat, G flat.
What about when you're listening to the radio? Do you think about all the pitches they're hearing, or you just listen to the music?
No, I just listen to the music.
And do things that are out of tune bother you?
No, not at all.
I sat down with Dylan's piano teacher, Joey Hokeam, yesterday to ask him about students that he's had with perfect pitch. Okay, so over the years, how many students have you had with perfect pitch?
Oh gosh, over the years, maybe 15, 20.
Yeah.
They're all very intelligent. They do very well in school. They have great memory. I can teach them orally. I can just sing the right notes and they go straight to it.
Very good. What about this chord?
They're easy to work with in the lesson, especially as far as hearing mistakes. And they're very quick learners. They're the ones that take the most AP classes. A lot of high SAT scores. One student with perfect pitch that now is doing a double doctorate at Harvard, PhD and MD in neurology.
I have really good memory for long numbers. 2 quintillion, 432 quadrillion, 902 trillion, 8,186,640,000. I can do pi for like a lot of digits. 2.14159265312897992. I can also do a periodic table. Hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen.
For another point of view, I decided to reach out to my dear friend Gabby Lanye, whose son Ariel was featured in a 2008 BBC documentary entitled Superhuman Genius.
Native fluency is more than just a perfect pitch. I'm referring basically to the ability to speak the language of music. It includes perfect pitch, and it includes much of the stuff that you did with Dylan and that I did with Ariel when they were tiny babies. I like the expression and the idea of native fluency because I like to think about it as being assimilated or absorbed the same way that tiny babies learn their native language at an early age. Well, early age is debatable, but certainly it begins at birth, at the latest, according to some even before. Just how long that window during which native fluency can be acquired, how long that window is open, we are not for sure. We start at birth to make sure that we catch that window. And we begin teaching language at birth, whether we like it or not. We're not making any kind of effort. We start talking to a baby as soon as the baby is born. So we want to do the same thing with music. Yeah, that's true. All babies hear music, but what kind of music do they hear most of the time? They hear what you would call low information content music. It's pop and stuff like that in a couple of keys with a few chord progressions, most of it 1, 4, and 5. We want to expose kids to high content information music, which in Western music is mostly classical music and jazz. Right. Perfect pitch is, in a way, a precondition for all this thing to happen. In order to be natively fluent in music, you need to have perfect pitch. But I believe that all children, all babies are born with perfect pitch already. What happens is that they lose it because it is not reinforced, because nobody tells them that a C is a C, that an F sharp is an F sharp, that a B flat is a B flat. So how are they to know? Consider how we learn our colors. It is constant, uninterrupted repetition day after day after day of the names of the various colors. Essentially, the brain receives a bunch of input through the eyes and receives inputs through the ears. Why should it process the wavelengths that it receives through the eyes any different from the way it processes the wavelengths that it receives through the ears? We see a whole spectrum of colors from violet to red, and we identify them by people telling us constantly that red is red and green is green and blue is blue. Well, the same way we hear a bunch of frequencies from about 16 to 20,000 hertz, and we hear these all the time, but nobody's telling us that a D is a D or a G is a G. So how are we to know? But in Western music, the sounds that we really refer to are sounds that appear on the piano keyboard, okay, on the piano keys. These are what we can refer to them as the official sounds. Okay, and so let's call them notes for now. In fact, there's only 12 of them, but they appear many times in the various registers. Now think how babies learn their native language. They hear the same word repeated endlessly day after day in, day out. They collect statistics on them, and after a while, meanings begin to attach to individual words. The same thing is happening to the sounds. They hear these sounds repeatedly, and they hear all kinds of sounds in nature. But these 88 sounds, in fact, they hear more often than the other sounds. So as they're collecting statistics on their sounds, these 88 are beginning to gain on the other sounds.
To test this theory of named or official pitches versus unnamed or in-between pitches, I recorded 1 minute of everyday household sounds that a baby would likely be exposed to and put a digital tuner to it. As you can see, there are virtually no sounds that fall exactly on one of the official pitches used in Western music. As a matter of fact, most of them are not even close. Now watch the tuner again when I play what I like to call high information music for it. All of this flashing that you're seeing is a signal that the named notes are catching up to the unnamed ones.
So they begin to fall into place, and they hear them more and more often. But still somebody has to name them. No matter how often you hear them, if you don't know that a B flat is a B flat, you'll never know. We have to name the sounds for them.
What I did to facilitate this note naming process was to create 24 major and minor pieces, each of which began by me playing the individual notes of the chord and stating their names. This was then followed by an etude based on this chord. C sharp minor, C sharp, E, G sharp, C sharp minor, C sharp, E, G sharp, C sharp minor.
Even if you don't have perfect pitch, I don't have perfect pitch, and I cannot produce a B flat, but I can sing a B flat with the piano. The good news is that we don't need to teach babies anything, because their brains are wired to learn, and they're wired to figure out the patterns and to figure out the rules.
Okay, here's a question I get asked all the time. Can adults develop perfect pitch? No, adults cannot. You have to be a baby to develop it. I'll give you a couple obvious examples that you may not have thought about before we talk about the real reasons why. Okay, if an adult could develop perfect pitch, then every piano tuner in the world would have it. And everybody that goes to music conservatories would have it too. Well, I know from personal experience, being a former college music professor, that any student that came in without perfect pitch left without it. If you think about it, these students are practicing 5 hours a day if they're performance majors. If anybody was going to develop it, they would. This is because babies are born with the unique ability to hear the phonetic units of every language spoken on Earth. That's 6,500 different languages which contain about 2,000 phonemes. Just to put that number in perspective, only 44 phonemes are used in the English language. This period of increased brain plasticity is called a critical window. At 10 months, before their first birthday and long before learning to talk, babies have already evaluated and dedicated themselves to their native language, including the language of music. This is dubbed the use it or lose it phase. Simply put, if babies do not need to recognize certain sounds, tones, or pitches, they lose the ability to do so. Imagine a baby's brain comprised of billions of neurons branching out, interacting with one another by forming synaptic connections. The more you stimulate a synapse, the more you reinforce the connection. But when certain synapses are not reinforced, they fade away, never to return again. When a baby is immersed in the language of music, they are looking for patterns of repetition and sequences in sound. This is how perfect pitch begins to develop. Thanks as always for watching. Please subscribe here or at my Everything Music Facebook page if you haven't already. Also, be sure to check us out on Patreon at the link provided. I'm Beato.